crazy things about P5, something about needing AM. So Xeno doesn't like P5, and I don't think Xeno is wrong in not liking P5. Xeno doesn't like this fight, and primarily it seems like Xeno doesn't like it for two reasons. Xeno doesn't like P5, and Xeno doesn't like the bugs. Now the bugs, that's totally fair. This fight has definitely more kind of weird and odd behavior. The amount of like auto attack induced deaths from like weird auto attack behavior in this fight is astronomical and also like higher than it should be. So that is valid for sure. But the thing with P5 is it is the by far hardest phase of the fight, right? Like Delta is considered the hardest mechanic of the fight, and I'm seeing people regard it as like one of the toughest mechanics they've designed. Right now, I'm not feeling it, but I also feel like I'm like every ultimate I prog, I feel like, you know, I'm getting better at the game, right? And so while I definitely think Delta is tough, I don't know that I think it's like unfair. But the three trio mechanics in P5 are very difficult. And the reason that Zeems mentions AM, anime music, of course, is that Party Finder, if and when it gets to that phase, is going to just do everything in that phase with auto markers. So the way auto markers work is they're basically scripts that run, and they mark players based on certain conditions, right? The idea is that you mark players such that when there's two valid options for a player, either there's like, let's say there's two ways to interpret this, right? There's two ways that they're used. Either there's like multiple valid positions for the player, in which case the auto marker will tell you which spot to go to, or there's two valid players for a mechanic. So like, let's say there's only one spot here, and so either Yeet or I could stand there. So now it marks Yeet, which means Yeet goes there. I think they're borderline cheating, if I'm honest with you. I don't like auto markers. I don't know if this is a hot take. I really don't like auto markers. Auto markers are going to demolish this fight, and it's going to be very sad. But the reason that Zeems specifically brings up in regards to P5 is there's a ton of mechanics that resolve around the dynamis stacks that you build up during the phase. They're not entirely random, but they're like 70% random. And so what that means is that when you get to the final mechanic especially, but honestly just in general, there's a sequence of two mechanics which revolve around players doing mechanics or not doing mechanics based on how many of these stacks they've accrued over the rest of the phase, which is a really cool way to like sort of tie in that mechanic with other mechanics, because in order to get the stacks that you need, because you have to end the phase with exactly 3, you can't be hit by 2 mechanics at the same time. And the only thing that can give you more stacks will kill you if you get hit by something else. So that's why you have to like do it in a specific way. So auto markers, when Party Finder gets to that phase, and honestly probably a lot of statics too, people are just gonna demolish it with auto markers. Like it's just gonna be like, instead of there being any kind of priority system or anything, or players marking themselves, whatever, it's gonna be literally players just like get marked by a bot and then go to a specific spot. And the reason for that is, again, auto markers are used when mechanics are incredibly random, or at least mostly random. I still think them using it for Wrath Flames was just a tragedy. Given that this entire fight, like this fight all the way through, is the most random ultimate in terms of like what mechanics you have to do and win, like that they've ever designed, auto markers are just gonna like demolish it. I think it's gonna actually be kind of a bummer, but I guess the alternative is like having like a player mark or a very convoluted priority system. We're probably gonna just have me mark everybody with macros, which is, I guess, really not that much more interesting than auto markers, but at least it's a player doing it, right? Anyways, that's the whole thing. There being a thing in P5 where if you get a certain pattern, tanks and end up with a magic phone. So that's a bug. That's definitely an oversight, and I hope they just change it and fix it. Titan jails. Titan jails don't need AM, but they either need people to self-mark or call it like over voice. And neither of those things lend themselves to Party Finder, which is why Titan jails has auto markers as sort of the de facto standard in Party Finder, and in a lot of statics too. Titan jails is like the one case where I'm like, I don't like using auto markers, but like if you're gonna use auto markers, I think that's like the one case where it's kind of like, okay, I understand. Especially in a Party Finder setting, okay. I think it's stupid that they're used for Wrath Flames. I don't know if that's a hot take. I think it's very stupid that they're used for Wrath Flames. PF relies on AM for Roth. I don't think it's entirely off the mark. Not at all. Not at all. No, and I said the same thing. I've been saying the same thing for a couple weeks. I hope that doesn't happen if that's the case. It definitely will. No, it definitely will. It's not even in question. Unless this game suddenly gets an anti-cheat or something. Dinos is getting AM. Oh, 100%. Sad to hear, but too much randomization is frustrating. I can understand that perspective, but I think that's what makes this fight so fun and interesting. Like, this fight's very enjoyable to prog. I personally... This fight feels very polarizing. I feel like people either really love it or really hate it. Ignoring the difficulty. Like, difficulty aside, it's obviously the most difficult ultimate they've ever designed, judging by clear rates that are already happening. Not to mention people's personal experiences with the fight. But even if you set that aside for a second, like, some people like the design of the fight and some people don't. I fall in the camp that very squarely just likes the design. I think it's very fun. And, like, I think Mr. Happy really likes the fight overall, but Zeems just hates it. And I know that Zeems is not alone in that either. I've seen like a few takes, you know, of people that just despise this fight, or at least think it's not very fun. Use AM, you can probably have a bot figure out the priority like GMT does. Right, exactly. Well, and to be fair, GMT has a 9th man also, which, like, is definitely kind of straddling the line. I think, like, still though, having a 9th man calling it for you is still having a person do it who can make mistakes and stuff. I just don't like auto markers, but I kind of understand, and especially in a party finder setting, I'm not gonna not do it if Party Finder's standard inevitably ends up on auto markers. I just don't like it, and I wouldn't use them in a static that I ran. Like, if I did this with like a more casual static or something later on, there's no way in hell I would use auto markers. Then again, I'd probably just mark people. Long story short, this fight's very polarizing and very random, and auto markers are gonna make things very different.